Okay, I think we'll get started. Welcome to the October 2021 edition of the Philanthropy Club. Appreciate your taking the time to join us. Before we get started and before our speaker speaks, just a couple things. I want to thank Gus Wilhelmi, who is the founder of the Philanthropy Club and the co-founder of the Safer Foundation. Also want to thank Forefront for hosting us, and especially the work of Key Montgomery, who is the woman behind the curtain. She's making this all possible. And a couple just Zoom etiquette things, which you probably are already very aware of. If you want to let us know who you are and the organization that you're affiliated with, put that in the chat. If you have any questions, put those in the Q&A. That after Tim gives his presentation, I will facilitate the Q's and Tim will provide A's. We're very fortunate to have with us Tim Jeffries, who is the Deputy Commissioner in the City of Chicago's Department of Planning and Development. And he's going to be talking about two programs that he manages, the TIF program, Tax Increment Financing, and the NOF, the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund, which both provide or spur economic development in the city, and both of which nonprofits can benefit from. And he will tell us about how the programs work and how that works. I'm going to turn things over to Tim, and he will begin. And also, before he begins his presentation, I've asked him to share a little bit about his background and how he has come to do what he's doing now. So Tim, take it away.
There you go, on mute. It's early still. Yeah, hi everyone. Tim Jeffries. As Rich said, I'm the Deputy Commissioner for the Financial Incentives Division in the city's Department of Planning. I've been here for about 8 years. I came to this job sort of through the ranks. I was hired as a program administrator first, did a lot of work around economic development programs, including the Retail Thrive Zone under Mayor Emanuel, and I helped, I was employee number 1 for the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund program. Eventually took this job. And before that, I also worked in nonprofits. I was the director of planning and policy for the Friends of the Parks, and before that I was a transportation planner at the Active Transportation Alliance, and even before that, going way back, I came to Chicago originally through UIC. I got my Master's of Urban Planning and Policy from there in 2011, and that's my story. These days I'm mostly juggling 2 very young children, so it's just kind of white knuckling through every day. Yeah, happy to talk about TIF, NOF, and I think there's going to be an ultimate focus on sort of the practical nuts and bolts of it, and how this group could apply to get funds, or how they could at least be considered for funds. Just how we'll do that is, there you go. I'll just give some high-level description and talking points and everything about the TIF program. I'll do the same for the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund program, have a moment to sort of compare and contrast them, and then, yeah, really just talk about the application process, what it's like for the city, and then finally just leave you guys some time to ask questions for me. With that said, I think that I always like to start these sort of things with some key takeaways. It's like that if you hear nothing else, it's just this is what you hear. So you know, TIF and NOF they're both city incentives, and they both fund permanent building improvements in certain geographies. That fund permanent building improvements is important for this group, especially because it really is focused on permanent improvements that will last beyond any single user. So things like operational expenses are not eligible for either program. In qualifying geographies, I'll talk about that a little bit more, but basically there's some places we can use these funds and some places we can't. These two programs are complementary, and there is a fair bit of overlap between the two, but there are some sort of critical distinctions that make one better in certain cases and another better in another case. All of that said, with everything I'm saying today, I think that we've tried to distill this presentation down to sort of the most critical facts. But at the end of the day, like, I think that one of the most important things to tell people is it's like, you don't need to be incentive experts. It's more important for you to be, sort of your project expert, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish? I think that I generally tell people that because too often people, they read something and then they think that they read the program rules, for example, and they think that they know exactly what we're looking for, or they interpret a rule one way, or they are trying to design their project to what they think we want. But there's a lot of nuance to these programs. It's a government program. There's rules, there's regs, there's a lot of gray in between the black and white rules. And so ultimately, the most important thing I tell people is just tell us what you want to do, and the city will tell you how we can or can't help. And this job has prepared me ultimately to I give a lot of bad news in this job. I give a lot of good news too, but I give a lot of bad news. And so I think that's one of the biggest things from this is, if you are interested in this program, just focus on tell us your dream, and we'll tell you what we can do. With that said, let's just hop in. I'll talk about TIF first. You can see this lovely picture behind you. It's the Remova Theater at 35th and Halstead. This is a recently funded TIF project. I think they're going to start groundbreaking in about a week. It'll be it's an old historic theater. It's a Chicago landmark. Will be a brew pub and a concert hall. What is TIF? TIF is a program that is noisy, and meaning that there's a lot of talk about it. There's criticism, some right, some wrong. But if I just cut through that noise and just get to TIF, what it ultimately is at the end of the day is a financing tool. And that's a financing tool that generates property taxes that is used for economic and community development projects or improvements. These improvements can cover a wide variety of uses, including infrastructure, schools, municipal facilities, and yes, private development projects, which is what most of these projects would fall under, or most of this group's projects would fall under. It exists at at an ultimate high level to address market deficiencies or budget caps, so that projects that can't, or that need to meet this but-for test. This is a legal term of art, and it means that the project would not happen but for the city's use of city funds, meaning all other funds have been exhausted, and there's nowhere else this project can turn because, for this audience, maybe you've just completely tapped out your donor pool, or you just don't have the reach to make your network does not currently match your ambition right now. For private development projects, it could be that private equity or lenders just won't lend in a particular area to the level that the project needs to be accomplished. So the city would step in. All of those situations would create this but-for test, meaning the project wouldn't happen but for the use of city incentives, and that's where TIF comes in. This program is overall, it's administered by DPD on a sort of a day-to-day basis, but it was created by the state back in 1979 or 1982. The city of Chicago first adopted it in 1984 under Harold Washington, at least, and that state act really sets the framework for how the city can and cannot use TIF. This chart just shows you briefly how TIF works. When I tell people this. It's imagine there's a map of the city, and in a particular map, the city draws a circle, and in that circle, the property tax values are $300,000. And so, as time goes on, the property taxes increase. You know, they might go to 340 as it is here, and then 355, and then 360. When a TIF is in place, that circle, the $300,000 within it, goes to the taxing bodies as it always has and always will. It's this extra money here, that $300,000 forms what we call the frozen base, and then the money above that forms what we call increment. And so the increment stays within that circle for use on projects within the circle. They can leave to an adjacent TIF under a mechanism called porting, but that's, you know, maybe a TIF 102, not a 101 class. But generally, that's the, you know, how the intent is supposed to work under the state law, is that, you know, if the properties within the circle generate funds for projects that will stay within the circle. So this TIF will stay in place for 24 years, 24 calendar years, 23 tax collection years. And then at the end, as you can see in this example, that money, when it's done, the taxes that have grown over time, the TIF will dissolve, and all of those funds will go back to the frozen base, and the taxes will sort of accrue as they normally always accrued. So the question is, where can TIF be used once those circles are drawn? Is, you know, on the right-hand side, you can see the map. This is the current map of where TIFs currently sit in the city of Chicago. As I said, the project must be located within that TIF, and the TIF can only be created when they meet certain legal thresholds that are defined under the State TIF Act. You know, I think overall, you know, we're kind of moving towards a post-TIF Chicago. I don't know if that's entirely fair to say, but we're certainly moving past, you know, in the next 4, 5, 6 years, this map will have a lot less color on it. You know, we're losing a number of TIFs. I think we're losing something like 70 to 80 TIFs within the next 6 years. And that's, we currently have 143. So more than 50% of this program will go dormant within the next few years. And then just generally, there is a temporal aspect to this. As I said, it's like these TIFs last for 24 years and the money must be spent within that time. If the TIF goes away and the project's not done, it's kind of done. The project's over. The city won't have a legal mechanism to actually make payments. So with that said, this is how TIF is generated. This is where TIF can be spent. And this pie chart shows you how TIF is actually used in the city of Chicago over the last, this is current over the last full 10 calendar years, meaning it hasn't been updated yet for the in progress for 2021. But over the last 10 years, nearly half of all TIF in the city of Chicago has gone towards public infrastructure costs. If you add up the public infrastructure plus transit plus the municipal facilities, schools, and parks, those are all what I would call fully public uses, meaning that the city or one of the sister agencies, like that's their money that they would spend on it. That's 83%. So the minority of projects, like 17.7%, either go towards economic development projects or affordable housing. And that's sort of the non-CHA category of affordable housing. So generally, how can TIF be used? Like I said at the outset, this is really about a permanent building improvement program. So we can use it for public infrastructure, municipal facilities, and the city has broad latitude to do so. We can use it primarily on the sweet spot of TIF for private projects, which would, you know, again, this is what I'm speaking to this group about, you know, the rehabilitation of existing buildings, meaning an existing building that's already there and making improvements to it. Like that's really the sweet spot of TIF. Affordable housing projects is also a good one, but you see if there's an asterisk on it. I'll just come back to that point on the ineligible category side. It can also do things like environmental remediation and site prep or property acquisition. And all of those just sort of work out to look at, you know, if a project needs or wants $10 million in TIF, but there isn't $10 million in either rehabilitation costs or environmental remediation or site prep or property acquisition. That's like the city can't provide $10 million. And so that's one of the factors that we certainly look at here. On the ineligible side of things, new construction. This has the asterisk because it's related to affordable housing. There is a provision that allows for affordable housing and affordable housing only to do new construction. And this is any vertical costs associated with new buildings. Also, fixtures, furnishings, equipment, FF&E, as it's called in the sort of sector. You know, if you have, I always tell people the easy term is, it's like, I classify FF&E as if you have a couple of friends in a truck and they pulled up to your building and were moving out, you know, what could they reasonably carry out in an afternoon? If they can carry out, it's probably FF&E. If it's, you know, if it's bolted down and not moving anywhere, like it's probably a permanent building improvement. Also critical is operational expenses, just any ongoing subsidy of the building or of the business or the organization. It's like, these are, again, permanent building improvements. Now, I mean, I think that it's worth saying that operational, if one of your organizations was renting, for example, and they moved into a new building that you owned and it was TIF funded, you know, certainly there could be operational savings on your end that is, you know, inured through that move, and TIF could help subsidize that move. But you know, that's a different thing than saying, hey, City of Chicago, I have a $2,000 rent due this month. Can you help me pay for it with TIF? So just wrapping up with TIF, just some big picture program considerations. There's no specific program funding cap per se, but you know, any given TIF has a finite amount of funds that are readily available that forms a practical cap. I would say that most projects typically fall within the range of, on the high end of 30% of the total project cost comes from TIF. You know, meaning if it's a $3 million total project cost, about $1 million from TIF. It has and can go up to about as high as 50%, but it's irregular. It's and atypical, but it has happened before. And then just another big thing to consider is that the TIF is usually provided as a reimbursement after the project is done and completed. So, you know, in many cases, projects, they do have to take on short-term debt or bridge loans in order to actually see them through construction and then get the TIF and have that TIF retire the debt. Yeah, I'll just pivot to NOF. I know, I think we're running, well, we're okay on time, Rich, right? Okay. So yeah, Neighborhood Opportunity Fund. This is a relatively new program. You can see this image is of the North Lawndale Employment Network. This is at the corner of Crenshaw and Roosevelt in North Lawndale. This is their new headquarters. They also have a company called Sweet Beginnings Cafe there. It's one of their recidivism programs. It's a really great project. This just opened up. So if anyone is in the neighborhood of Crenshaw and Roosevelt, I definitely recommend popping in. It's a great project. So Neighborhood Opportunity Fund, or NOF, this is a grant program that we use it for rehabilitating existing buildings or constructing new buildings that are for commercial uses or cultural assets in the south, southwest, and west sides of Chicago. This program has a strong focus on increasing community-based wealth and generally improving the quality of life of the residents in the neighborhoods that these projects are going. NOF is different than TIF in that it has sort of two tracks. It has what they call NOF Small, which is a grant that is less than $250,000, or they have Large, which is more than $250,000 but less than $2.5 million. I'll say that I specifically oversee Large. Small sits with another group, but I can answer questions about it. I know more about Large, but I can answer questions about Small as I can answer questions about Small, I suppose. So how does NOF generate funds? This program, I think that there's a fair bit of pride behind this program in DPD because it really is, it's innovative. No one has ever quite done anything like this before in the United States, at least. So this was created in 2016. And you can see on the map, there's the downtown area. All of these places are either have what we call a D zoning, which is a downtown zoning code, or they are eligible to get a D zoning. And an allowance of the zoning code says that if you're a D zone, you can buy, you can earn, I guess, more density for your project. So you could go from, without getting too wonkish with zoning, you could go from a DX5, which maybe would allow you to build 30 stories, up to a DX7, which would allow you to build 50 stories. Prior to 2016, you'd earn this by doing things that were ultimately kind of better for your project than it was for the community as a whole. You could build a winter garden on the roof. You could build a little public plaza in front that was, maybe used by people walking by, but it's mostly used by employees taking a break and drinking a coffee outside. Ultimately, they're things that building developers would probably be doing anyway because they're good for tenant amenities and good for attracting people. So in 2016, this was changed and the bonus was retained, but it's just a straight up cash purchase. You can buy extra density from the city of Chicago. And the city takes that money and it splits it into 3 pots of funds. 80% of it goes to the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund. 10% goes to the Adopt a Landmark Fund, which is used for historic landmark stabilization or improvement to citywide landmarks. And 10 is to local impact funds, which is used for things like schools, libraries, roads within a mile radius of the actual development itself. This is, so where the 80%, I'll talk about the 80%, and where the 80% goes is important because this essentially is a little bit of a Robin Hood situation. It takes money that is generated in these areas on the map and you can spend it in these areas on this map on the right. And the yellow area is the focus of it. The yellow area is what we call the qualified investment area. This was set, again, back in 2016, based on some academic research that was done by a professor at the University of North Carolina that showed that these areas of the city were had the greatest persistent economic disadvantage since the 1960s. What we mean by that is that they had negative economic indicators, not just today, not just last year, but persistently and significantly over a very long term. So the whole concept of the program is, again, you take that money that comes from downtown and you put them in projects that are in these economically disadvantaged areas. This boundary can be updated and it's probably due for an update in 2022 when we get final census data and when DPD gets sort of a chance to dig in and figure out how these indicators have changed over the last 10 years. Large can be used anywhere within the area that is indicated in yellow. Small projects must additionally be on one of the corridors, an eligible corridor that is marked in either blue or red. Blue is just an eligible corridor, red is a priority. They're both eligible, but one gets a little bit higher bump on the scoring when projects are evaluated. So large, at least over the last, the first large projects were awarded in 2018. So since then, we've awarded 22 projects for about $33.6 million. We just closed a round last 2 weeks ago, Friday, on the 24th. I guess that's last week. And we anticipate that we'll probably make about another $4 to $5 million in awards by the end of the year or in very early 2022. More funds are coming in 2022 as well. And it's just funds will just keep flowing out. And we do this on a round-based structure. So twice a year, we'll do sort of a call for people to apply and we evaluate what we've got. So how can NOF be used? Very similar to TIF. As I said at the top, it has to be used for cultural uses or commercial uses or cultural institutions. I'll contrast that on the other side a little bit in a second. Like TIF, rehab of an existing building is fine. Unlike TIF, new construction is allowed, which is a big bonus for this project. Just like TIF, environmental remediation, site prep, acquisition, all eligible. Soft costs, meaning architecture design, are also eligible. That was omitted from TIF, but those are also eligible costs under TIF. What's not eligible is residential and industrial uses. They're just per the code. They're not allowed. Neither are support services or programs, which for this audience might be that's probably what a lot of you do is, you offer support services. That's just not how this program was designed. I think it's really meant to be providing commercial uses in places that lack things like a sit-down restaurant or good grocery options. There are other funds that the city uses to support support services and programs and things like that. Just NOF's not right there. Unlike TIF, we also can't use it for things like schools, parks. This is fully private uses only. Like TIF, operating expenses, FF&E, and sort of these minor ticky-tack repairs, they're just not eligible for the program. Some things to consider generally is I would reorder this if I did this again, so I'll do the third one first. But for large, especially like the largest grant that we can give out is 2.5 million. Can't go above that mark. Back up at the top now, that has an additional layer of if it's a new, we're capped at how much we can actually provide for a project. So we can only provide 30% for a new construction project, and we can only provide 50% of a rehab project. So if you've got a bigger project that's $9 million, meaning 4.5 million is half your rehab cost, it's like, no, you actually only get 2.5. It's the lesser of the one of those two. NOF does allow those numbers to creep up a little bit, though. As I said earlier, there's a real emphasis on community wealth building with this program, and so those numbers can jump up by 25% through either one of the building community wealth bonuses, is what we call them. It's either if you're the applicant and the applicant lives within the QIA, like your primary residency is within there, then you can bump that up by 25%. Or you can take that if you will, after you open, hire new employees who also live within the QIA. The wages for those for up to a year can be paid for with NOF. Unlike TIF, or I guess like TIF, these funds can be provided as a reimbursement, but this program also has a sort of built-in allowance to provide funding through a construction escrow, meaning that you can take draws as your project moves forward. That is something that was like greatly requested, and we were happy to provide it. So just this is a sort of a quick comparison between the two programs. Not going to go into them exhaustively, but I'll have this presentation for others or for everyone if they want to see it after the fact, and you can peruse this at your leisure. But I think this does a fairly good job of laying out the sort of where each of these lie. The big things I'll just point out is the maximum award. There is none for TIF. It's capped at NOF. The project review, TIF is done on the basis of sort of underwriting in that but-for test I mentioned. With NOF, we use a scorecard. We look at the applications. They're the sort of the substance and quality of the responses are reviewed. Either most of them are objective, a few of them are subjective, and they're assigned a score. And that score is we take the top awardees. No limitation on TIF for eligible project uses. There is on NOF, and NOF does allow for new construction, but TIF only allows it for the affordable housing. So I'll just take a couple minutes to talk briefly about the application. One thing that sorry, I'll pause. This is a picture of the Lillian Marcy Theater. It is moving through our process now. It was at the Community Development Commission a few months ago. It's $3.5 million in TIF for the restoration of this building. Is Lillian Marcy Theater. It's a sort of a theater company that will be focused on the Black metropolis experience, really a strong focus on African American and culture and their sort of the volume of work that they have coming out of that. So yeah, it's a great project. Harry Styles from he's an actor. He's Chicago based. He was Chicago based. He's coming back in order to run this theater. So So how to apply? One of the big changes that we've made recently, and I mean recently as of this summer, is that we created a universal application. Previously, if you were interested in NOF, you'd apply for NOF. If you were interested for TIF, you'd apply for TIF, and also property tax abatements, which is a program I didn't talk about today. That sort of runs contrary to what I said at the beginning, is that it kind of that kind of requires you to be an incentive expert. You know, if previously, if you applied for NOF and we looked at it and said like, it's not really like, it's not a good project for NOF, but you should try TIF. You know, I think the assumption would be, yeah, we'd work with you, but like you kind of have to submit a new TIF application. We've done away with that. You apply one time, we look at your project, and the city tells you how we think you should go and what the best option is for you. And that's just really all about breaking down barriers, not just for this group, but for all groups, in order to have, you know, people who, you know, maybe they've not done real estate projects before. Maybe they've got a great business that's, you know, existing, or they want to run a great business, but they're not real estate experts. And, you know, frankly, the old TIF application was intimidating. And so we now have this two-part application process, which the first application just says, like, this is sort of the minimum that we need in order to evaluate your project. I'm not going to say that it's like, you know, easy, but it's a lot easier than it used to be. And then once we have that application, once we've had a chance to review it, make a determination that, yeah, you know, the best fit for you is NOF or TIF or whatever, or maybe we can't do the project. At that point, we'll let you know, okay, we're going to move forward and we need a bit more information, or sorry, this is, you know, we'll see what we can do about it, but incentives is not the right fit for you at this time. I guess for that, you know, we're always accepting applications, and at any time we'll look at them and return comments and give you comments. Specifically for NOF, I'll say, you know, we do make decisions on TIF. We accept applications, and we make decisions on applications on a rolling basis. On NOF, we accept applications on a rolling basis, but we decide twice a year. You know, we'll have two deadlines, and we'll say, okay, at this deadline, whatever we got in hand for NOF, like, we're going to look at it right now. And so with NOF, you're always best off submitting your application as soon as you can, because we'll give you feedback in real time. And the goal would be for you to, you know, for us to say like, okay, you know, you've got your application and it looks good, but your sources and uses looks a little funny, or you say you're going to have something, you know, a bank is going to provide $2 million in loans, but like, do you have any evidence of that? And then you could go back and fix those issues and resubmit them and get a higher score before the deadline ends. And so it's really just, it's meant to create sort of this positive feedback loop of feedback, I suppose, that you know, you're constantly hearing from us what you can do to improve your project, and then, or your application, so that you're constantly scoring higher and higher. I have the application too. I can pull up in a second if anyone wants to see it, just as like a sort of a flash. I wouldn't walk through it. It's like 10 pages long. So, but you know, once an application is submitted, again, this just shows a little bit of the side by side of what happens. The only thing I really want to point out here is that they're pretty similar. You know, and the goal is, I think, for us now is to really break down these silos. And, you know, I'm talking about these as the TIF program and the NOF program, but that has always struck me as like a little bit of a silly notion. Like, those are funding sources. Like, at the end of the day, is that really what the project is about? Like, that it has a particular funding source? Like, it's relevant, certainly, but that's not what is impactful about the projects that are funded. And so I guess just, yeah, big picture, it's just like, I'm just trying to, whatever a project does get selected for which source of funding, it's our goal to sort of break down these silos as much as possible. We can't do that. We can't make them exactly one-to-one because of legal requirements at the state and local level. But, you know, it's our goal to make things as seamless and easy as possible for folks. So again, I'll have the deck ready for Pete to share after the fact, but you guys can look at this at your own time if you're interested. So I said at the forefront, don't worry about being incentive experts, and I'll reiterate that fact. But if you are interested in applying, I'll just give you a couple of quick things that I think you should know or should do. Is that it is good to give the program requirements a quick read through, and if you're most specifically should be focusing on the geographic area, the eligible uses, and the amount of funding that you may or may not be requesting, because all of those are sort of critical failure points for the application. You shouldn't be applying for TIF if you're not in a TIF district, for example. Again, like I said, you should submit the application as soon as you're ready, because we're prepared to give you feedback on a rolling basis. You should assemble the best. That's not to say give us a half filled out application. You should still assemble the most complete application as you can. But we're here to provide feedback and give you direction on where you might need course correction. Again, just make sure your application is, when you do submit it, it's as complete as possible, it's as thorough as possible, and it's focused on your real estate project and not the overall outcomes or goals, or maybe non-eligible uses. And then ultimately, if you've got questions, contact us. This email down here, we monitor it, and we answer questions that come in virtually every day. So that's it for me.
All right, time for questions. So I'm going to look at these and give them to you in the order in which they were asked. This is from Tom Tresser. He asks, what is the justification for giving a multi-billion-dollar public subsidy to Lincoln Yards and Project 78, both in white affluent communities? If mega developments choose large areas, then they should cover 100% of all costs for their project.
Well, it's obviously it was a big issue when it happened, and it's still a big issue. I think the best thing I can say is that we did look at their numbers, and the level of investment that is being done there is substantial. They're both in the magnitude of $500 million each in city infrastructure, and not just sort of ticky-tack roads. These are big projects. With the 78, for example, there's the total realignment of existing metro tracks that make development along State Street between Roosevelt and 15th virtually impossible. There's the creation of a new CTA station on Lincoln Yards. There's, I think, 3 or 4 new bridges that do not exist today. And if anyone has been through that area, they're like, that's an issue. It's very difficult to get through there. It was infrastructure that was built for industrial users. And at some point, many years prior to the Lincoln Yards project, the city passed one of its first sort of neighborhood-based comprehensive plans, and since I had been with the city, at least with the North Branch Framework Plan, and it outlined the vision that this would go. And I would say that the infrastructure is consistent with that plan, and that the regional impact of the infrastructure, and the fact that we did crunch their numbers, we did look at it, and we did not feel that the project could or would absorb those costs. There was simply too much. It's $500 million. It's a lot. And so, at the end of the day, the last administration made a call.
Okay. Next is from Brenda Swartz of Concordia Place. Will TIF cover professional fees for architectural costs?
Yes.
Okay, great. This is from Janice Feinberg. I heard that in order to be considered for an NOF, you have to build a coalition and get a letter of support from the local alderman.
I would say, is there a checkbox on my application that says, where's your letter of support from the alderman? Like, no, but it's certainly, it's certainly a good thing to check in with your alderman. for a lot of reasons, but frequently these projects also require zoning changes, and the zoning changes are fully within the purview of the alderman. And so the earlier you can get in front of them and understand what zoning challenges may or may not exist for the site, the better.
Okay, this is from Nalani. Are urban farm/agricultural organizations eligible for funding?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
That would be one that we would want to probably talk about. I think some costs certainly would be, if you were going to acquire the property, if you were going to remediate the property to get it to be sort of, I mean, I guess I don't know your project specifically. I'm assuming that like you do raised bed stuff, but there's surely some costs eligible in there.
Sounds like it's a question that should be asked you via that email address.
Yeah.
Okay.
Especially once you could provide some kind of like details about like this is what we're looking to do. So
Great. This next question is from Mark Sengstack. How are lending institutions, banks, savings and loans, etc., involved in TIFs?
Officially, no official role for them, but we certainly maintain relationships with them because, if an average TIF project is, 30 to 50% funded, that means it's 50 to 70% funded through something else. And the best, cheapest way is commercial debt. And so we have relationships with lenders throughout Chicago who have familiarity with TIF, but they work with us to make sure that the TIF terms don't fight their lending terms, and so everything sort of plays nice in the sandbox together. But no sort of official formal role with lenders.
Okay. This next question is from Mark Sengstack also. If TIF money is not released until the end of the TIF period, where does money come from for expenditures before the end of the TIF period?
TIF generates money on a rolling basis, so it starts generating it the year after. It's just that the base. So I think maybe he's referring to this. I think he's referring to this slide. So this red is available throughout the life of the TIF for expenditures. It's just when the TIF ends, the TIF, instead of the taxing bodies getting 300,000 like they did when the TIF was in place, they'll now get 365,000. So the money comes in on a rolling basis as taxes are collected throughout the life of the TIF.
Okay. Let's see here. Okay, here's a question from Brenda Swartz. How can you apply early enough in your project to know if TIF or NOF is a funding option for your project, but you might not have enough info to really apply, like you don't have drawings?
Good question. I would say that, specifically, let's just take this as if it's a theoretical NOF project. Like, I think you could apply, and if you applied without things like drawings, like it's with our scorecard, there's no one thing that'll be like, no, you didn't get it, so goodbye. You don't have your drawings. Like, no, we're absolutely not funding it. We have projects that we've awarded that have been ready to start construction like very quickly. We've had projects that they lag because they're doing things like firming up their architectural, and so there's no one question that would, the lack of drawings would totally tank your application. Certainly having them would make it better, but I think you should just apply when you have a good idea of the overall, like, what are you trying to accomplish, with the project. Where is that project going to be located and how much is it going to cost generally? And then we might give you instruction back that says like, yeah, you didn't get it. You should really like pursue some, engage an architect to start getting some of these drawings. That could be one of our points of how you could improve your application. But until we have it, we can't give you that advice.
Okay, great. This is from Bradley Trost. Can an NOF project be mixed use with commercial and support services, or does it need to be exclusively commercial or cultural?
No, it can be mixed. We could have, you could have a project, your sort of capital P project, meaning like the legal definition of your project could be, it could include residential above. We would just carve it out of your TIF of your NOF eligible budget, meaning that we would say like, okay, your total project's going to cost $9 million and 60% of the building is residential, so your NOF total project cost is $3 million, and therefore you could get 1.5 from that. That's half of your commercial budget.
Okay.
And we've done it a lot, so it's
okay. This is from Brenda Swartz. Are the TIF and NOF funds considered a grant or a loan?
NOF is definitely a grant. TIF, with some rare exceptions, or I wouldn't, maybe like increase 90% of the time, TIF would be a grant. Occasionally, we structure them as a loan.
Okay. This is from Mark Sengstack. If an application is submitted for a TIF project, what are typical sources used to pay the applicant's portion of the TIF project?
I guess, meaning, if the question is meaning the other sources besides TIF, like what makes up the rest of the capital stack, it just really depends. We've seen, certainly equity investments. We've seen, and that could be outside, like people are attracting equity to a project. It could be the applicant's personal equity that they have in the project. That can be, liquid dollars, or that can be sort of they've owned the building already. We have seen certainly debt, just bank loans. We also have donations. And then you can move to sort of some like more sophisticated things like new market tax credits, or federal opportunity zone funds. And then if you move into the sort of affordable housing sector, you've got the whole layer cake that I will immediately be out of my depth on how to provide context for that. But things like LIHTC or the city's home funds, like those are all costs that could come to bear.
Okay.
And I guess if your question was also like maybe what typical sources to cover your TIF, meaning how do you get your reimbursement? Almost always we see that as the same entity that provides your sort of first mortgage will just give you a little bit extra. And then when you convert from your permanent or from your construction loan to your permanent mortgage, the TIF will come in and take out part of that debt.
Okay. We don't have any more questions. Does anybody want to add any? I mean, you don't have to. No one's putting a gun to your head. I think this has been very informative. And then just so attendees know that this is being recorded, and Tim's PowerPoint will be available, and also to encourage you that any of you that have any, actually here's another final, well, here's another question from Brenda Swartz. Does it make any difference to your application or to the process afterwards if you are a nonprofit?
No.
Okay, that's good. So just to encourage those of you that will have questions after this to contact or to email the email address that Tim has provided that will be in his PowerPoint. And I think we can probably wind this up. I just want to mention that the Philanthropy Club's next session will be the first Tuesday of November. And actually, Tim just put in the chat the email address that can field questions. And also that Key Montgomery is going to be sending out a questionnaire to everybody that's attending. We've sent this out in the last couple of days to regular Philanthropy Club attendees. It's just to get some feedback about what you'd like to see for future presenters, and how you think things have been going so far. So we'll always look for your input.
Rich, I have one more thing too.
Yes, go ahead. I was going to give you the last word.
I guess at some point somebody said something about a meeting. I just dropped into the chat a link, and that was anyone can request a meeting. It's sort of our it's a meeting request form. If you can certainly just fire off a quick rapid question, and that's no big deal. We'll answer them. You also have that link that I sent in there that can be for if you have a more advanced project and you want to talk through some of the particulars maybe before you dive into an application. You can fill this out. It just asks a couple basic questions about your project, location, budget, uses, big picture stuff. Oh, here, hold on. There's the link again.
People see that, and I assume I can see it in the chat. Okay, Brenda.
I'll finish my thought and then I'll make sure that it gets sent out before I disconnect. But yeah, this is just if you have if your project's more advanced and you're ready to sort of talk shop about some detailed stuff. We hold time every Friday at 10 a.m. It's sort of on a first come first serve. Whoever asks for the spot gets it. So if you want to avail yourself of that avenue to reach out to us and talk to us about your specific project, that works too.
Okay, any final questions? It looks like people can now see the links, which is good. So I think we can say goodbye, and thanks to Tim, and thanks to Forefront for hosting the event, and look for the recording. And Tim has certainly made himself available to answer any questions, and this has been really great, Tim. We really appreciate it. So that being said, go forth and raise money. Goodbye.
Everyone.